8 o'clock. I'm glad you're still with us here on Morning at NTV. Whoever is making their way into the city, again, we continue to say the roads are wet and the gridlock is expected to hold really thick as the hours go by, as people come into the city center. So as you are making your way, please ensure that the roads that you choose or the access routes are the ones that can quickly get you to the city center. For those that are prone to, well, some allergies, ensure you have some heavy and warm clothes with you, because the morning is not the very best. We've been undergoing a heat wave. Now that we have the rains, again, we are crying. But let's come to the studio and get underway with our Kickstarter discussion. We're talking about TB that kills 30 Ugandans every single day. Let that sink in. Every day, at least 30 Ugandans succumb to tuberculosis-related complications. And the mantra right now from all stakeholders is, yes, we can end tuberculosis. What are you doing to end tuberculosis, wherever you are, within the powers that you have, including individually, the need to, first and foremost, seek treatment at the notice of the symptoms of tuberculosis, maintaining that regime of medicines and treatment, but also staying away as in not becoming one that transmits tuberculosis. Yesterday was World Tuberculosis and Leprosy Day, and the national commemorations were held in Nakasongola district, and that was at Nakasongola RSC primary school grounds. And the guest of honor's message, that is a Prime Minister's message, was delivered by a delegate. And of course, like I said, the theme was, yes, you can end TB, commit, invest, and deliver. This year, Uganda is paying more attention to ending tuberculosis as well as leprosy. In the studio, we are joined by two gentlemen, scientists, experts, but also very committed to ending tuberculosis. Dr. Rodrigo Nyinoburio, Programs Manager, Uganda's Top TB Partnership. Many thanks for joining us. It's your very first time here on Morning at NTV.
Thank you for having me.
Usual suspect, I should say. Dr. Raybun Byaruhanga, Senior Technical Advisor, TB, Ministry of Health. You're also a member of the National TB Leprosy Division of the ministry.
Yes.
Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you very much for hosting us here at NTV.
Yes, we are always emboldened by your expertise, but most importantly, the zeal with which you guys are doing your jobs.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Let me begin with Dr. Byaruhanga.
Yes, please.
Not the least because you've been around here, but from the perspective of government, there is what appears to be a concerted effort to rein in on a disease that is very costly in all terms to the individuals, the citizens, but also the government, especially when it comes to the interventions to end tuberculosis. Bring us up to speed with where we are right now.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you for hosting us here at NTV.
You're most welcome.
Good morning, viewers and listeners out there and the communities out there. Tuberculosis is one of the diseases that has actually devastated our people. It's an old disease, and since 1894, something like that, when it was first diagnosed way back by a doctor called Cox, and that's why at times you'll hear in the medical family, in the medical fraternity, they call it Cox disease.
Cox disease.
Yes, but because it was...
you guys have a tendency of attaching diseases to people.
to people. They never know.
In my trade, I wouldn't love that.
So it's an old disease. Uganda happens to be among the 30 high-burden TB countries in the world, meaning that if you count of the 180 or so countries that are in the world, Uganda is among the 30 high burden as classified by the World Health Organization. And as you've given a rightful statistics, the biggest worry that we all have is that 30 people die every day. That's a coaster, dying every day because of tuberculosis. But before they die, in Uganda, as estimated by WHO, we have about 96,000 new TB patients that are supposed to be diagnosed every year. 96,000. If I put it in perspective, the HIV pandemic that we've had for some time now, since 1982, around there, we have managed to bring it down. About 5 years ago, there were about 150,000 people getting HIV every year. Today, HIV, thanks to the efforts from the Ministry of Health, thanks to the efforts from the President, all those that have managed to speak and talk, we brought down HIV to less than 50,000 people getting HIV every year. Tuberculosis still claims 96,000 people every year. And we are able as a country, thanks again to the efforts that have been put out there by the government, by partners and stakeholders, including NTV here, to create awareness. We are able to pick up to 92,000 people every year. We still have 4,000 that we need to pick up.
That's right.
And every year, if you don't pick up these people, they transmit.
Yeah.
So that's the big problem. I can, however, with all certainty say that tuberculosis is preventable. Tuberculosis is treatable. Tuberculosis is curable. We have the drugs. We have the tools to be able to diagnose it as early as possible. The challenge is the level of awareness of our communities. And that's why we have events like the World TB Day. As we call it in health, we call it the World TB Month of March. And I know March has also our ladies, so they also call it the World Women's Month. But then another big statistic that is so surprising, and that's why you see men here specifically, is because for it affects more men than women. We have more 2/3 of men that get TB compared to women. Why?
I was just going to.
I don't know.
Don't know.
We still have a lot of speculations around that. But that is the situation. We have a lot of speculations. We know that men do not seek care in facilities, and therefore when they remain out there, they are the ones who are transmitting it.
That is right.
And then secondly, we know that they are the ones who tend to congregate together, because TB tends to be in congested settings. And we know that more men, I don't know, but from my statistics, I've seen more men smoking than women. So there are some factors that have been associated with the men's lifestyle.
That's right.
That has also led to them getting TB more than women. Women tend to seek care in hospitals, even with their children, and therefore the diagnosis is done early and they are treated. But when a woman tells a spouse or a girlfriend tells the spouse that let's go for treatment now that I have TB, you can also come, it's very difficult for the men to come. And I think that's where we need, as ministry, as stakeholders, to start getting strategies on how do we get the men into on board.
That is interesting, and tells of a very huge budget when it comes to the country bearing the cost of treatment. Mr. Rodrigo, you are embedded in interventions from the civil society point of view, and I'm sure you bring yourself into the mix and understand the burden as it is. You would be in the best position, I think, to advise on how, for example, to bring the men on board, especially when it comes to coming for treatment. What is the thrust of your interventions as Uganda's top TB partnership?
Thank you, and good morning, viewers, and thanks for having me here.
You're welcome.
Yes, as my colleague mentioned, tuberculosis has been around for quite some time. We've had new diseases, COVID recently, even HIV is new compared to TB. But we've had TB for over 100 years now, at least since the time they discovered the germ. And the first drugs, I think, for TB were discovered about 80 years ago in 1945. Previously, someone would get the disease, they waste away and die. But in 1945...
attribute it to something else.
Yes. In 1945, there was a breakthrough. The scientists discovered the medicine. And since then, we've been treating TB, but it's still with us. And what are the reasons? The awareness, the low awareness in the community that my colleague talked about. And that's where civil society comes in. Because the drugs are at the health facilities, and they are free in Uganda, courtesy of the government and other supporters. But we're still not ending TB. So there's a bit the community has to play, and that's where civil society comes in. So as civil society, we engage in raising awareness. Like the commemorations, in the national commemorations were in Nakasongola yesterday, but in the weeks leading to that, civil society organizations were at the forefront of raising awareness through several activities. One, moving around and informing people about the symptoms of TB, so that people reach a level, and even if you're at home, I'll give an example of a disease like malaria. When you're at home and you feel some symptoms, you will carry yourself to the health facility.
Very quickly.
Quickly, and you'll even talk to the musao or the health worker that please check me for malaria. Now, TB, we think we have not reached that level of awareness. Someone being able to recognize the symptoms and carry themselves, and even in case the health worker forgets, check for TB also. So civil society is playing a critical role in trying to raise that awareness so that people can be able to come out. At the moment, the Ministry of Health and partners, we are doing a lot of going out. Because if you wait for the patients to come to the health facility, Dr. Raymond mentioned the far we've achieved in terms of finding TB cases, but that has been mainly due to ministry putting interventions and partners of going out to look for those TB cases into the community. But now we want to reach a level of awareness where people actually bring themselves. And in terms of engaging men more, like my colleague has mentioned, men being affected, there are strategies by the ministry and partners to reach out more to men. We know where the men are, so we have to go out and, if I could use the word, bombard them with the message, and so they are able to come out and also be champions. So we're engaging men, border people, like in the week leading up to the World TB Day, we're in Nakasongola camp there, we're engaging the border people, in their conversations on their border stages. In addition to talking about football, can they also have some knowledge to talk about this disease
and
of
Ukraine's latest aircraft bomb?
Exactly. Where else do we find the men? The bars in the evenings, drinking local brew.
That is right.
Some practices, sharing, the straws and all that. So we are trying to late strategies how we can reach the men more, because the women are already empowered enough in terms of healthcare seeking, but for the men, we want to try and change that narrative and reach out the message to men. So that's another role for civil society on the side of TB. Another one is also advocacy. Civil society plays a lot of advocacy. There are different levels of advocacy at policy level, at advocating for increased funding. The situation we've been in. Most of the funds that have been supporting most of these disease programs from foreign countries. So civil society is also playing a big role in advocating government to increase funding for these diseases.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burio. I would have stayed with you regarding the prevalence of TB and which areas are most affected, but I do believe that that is information that you consume from the experts, and then you act on those interventions. So I'll gladly go to Dr. Byaruhanga. Where are the should I call them flashpoints
or
hotspots?
Yeah,
where TB is prevalent, and it's disturbing the experts in how it's turning out.
Okay, thank you very much. TB, we last did our national prevalence survey in 2014 for tuberculosis.
Wow.
And we are supposed to be doing another one, actually, according to WHO, around this time. It's every 10 years that we do it. TB has been, we've studied a lot of patterns around tuberculosis. And one of the areas that we really see tuberculosis, especially in Uganda, there are some vulnerable populations that we are really following up and working with. The first one are the smokers, people who smoke both tobacco, use tobacco, but also now they are new
shisha across the entertainment scene.
Exactly, and those are the areas. Why? Because those affect the lungs, and tuberculosis affects the lungs most, and that's what we really look out for, because once you have tuberculosis and it's in the lungs, once you start coughing, then you are more of transmitting the disease. So we try to make sure that we look out for those people that are actually using different methods of affecting their lungs, and therefore those are the people we look out for. So the smokers are very critical. Number two, we have the people living with HIV, or people who have a decreased immunity. Whether it's cancer patients, whether it's diabetic people, these are the people that we actually look out for in terms of making sure that once you have these preconditions, then we must always screen you for tuberculosis so that we avoid you getting tuberculosis, or if you have tuberculosis, you are treated as quickly as possible so that we reduce the levels of people dying.
Okay.
The third one, and which is very important, are the contacts. Once you have a TB patient, TB does not come from nowhere. If there is a TB patient, there must be someone that is transmitting it. So if you are able to get Dr. Raymond with the TB, look around Raymond's community. Look around Raymond. Who are the contacts? Does he already sit with the Rodrigo here? And therefore, Rodrigo needs to be contacted and brought and screened and tested for tuberculosis.
That's right.
Is he staying with his spouse? Yes. If he is,
the spouse should come.
If there are children at home or maids at home that are around this particular TB patient, they should be contacted, either brought to the facility and screened and tested, or we have now methods of going out, both as ministry and as our partners, to go out and screen these people. So contacts is another big group. Then the fourth one, which is beyond just the contacts or the immunity or the smokers, are people who live in congested places, like the slums, where there are many people. Those tend to, because if one person is there and is transmitting, then he transmits to everybody. Recently we had a camp where we were screening in the taxi parks. And some people are saying, no, but you see, these drivers, buses and conductors, they are okay. We should only screen the passengers and the rest. Surprisingly,
very surprisingly,
one of the buses I'll not mention here, the driver had tuberculosis, but he was driving people. The good thing with the driver is that he drives with the open window, so that could have prevented people from getting tuberculosis. But we are missing such people. In the same taxi park, a lady who was selling groundnuts just down there as people are boarding the bus, when we screened her, she had tuberculosis. So you can see tuberculosis is not meant to be, you will not get it anywhere. You need to be very systematic, and that also it makes sure that we are more efficient in finding out tuberculosis. So those are the communities that we really need to seek out for. But also very importantly, where, as Rodrigo says, where are the men?
I'll be returning to that.
Yes.
It's a very pertinent question, in fact, because resistance there's an aspect of resistance to drugs.
Yes.
There's in treatment of TB.
Yes.
That is also another challenge. But allow me dwell a little bit on the symptoms.
Yes.
Or somebody must be able to understand the difference between a regular cough and tuberculosis, so that you do not stay transmitting, or you do not become overly anxious when you're dealing with just a regular cough. Maybe you still can take that one.
So the symptoms, or what shows that someone has tuberculosis, the first one, as I said, more especially tuberculosis affects the lungs.
The lungs,
So the first one is a cough, and a cough of whatever duration. This is where I want to appeal to the people out there. Please, if you have a cough and it is unexplained because of recent, as you've said, we've been having heat waves around. Maybe it is dusty, so you're having this cough, but it's not going. You're taking some syrups, you're taking some Genacough, and you see it's not going. Investigate that cough. Ask, what is this cough? Why am I having this cough? Now, in addition to this cough, if it has blood in it, then you have to suspect highly that this cough could be tuberculosis and go for testing. The cough can come with night sweats. At night, now it is raining. But then at night you're having...
somewhere you're sweating.
You are sweating profusely, and yet it is raining. Ask yourself, I have a cough, and I'm sweating at night. I'm having evening fevers. As it clocks evening, you tend to have fevers. Many of these TB patients that have been treated for TB come with classic symptoms. Every evening, as I close the windows, I just find myself with a fever. Even when it's hot, I'm having a fever. When it's cold, I'm having a fever. Evening fevers, they are very specific. But however, there are other signs and symptoms. Unexplained weight loss. Or for children, if they gain on weight, they are eating, but they are not gaining weight. They are always crying. For children, it is even more clear. We have what we call milestones in their growth. Some milestones are not being achieved. A child who is supposed to be walking is still crawling. A child who is supposed to be crawling is still sleeping. A child who is supposed to be laughing and smiling is not at all laughing and smiling. And then when added with the poor gain in weight, and then most importantly for children, that child must have an adult or someone within the vicinity that actually has tuberculosis. But in addition to the poor weight or the weight loss, for unexplained weight loss for the adults, we also have malnutrition. Those that are malnourished, we need to look out for them as well. So those are very clear signs and symptoms. But I will also want to say that we'll see some people of recent, we've been seeing people who do not have a cough, but have other signs and symptoms. They have swelling of their nodules. Please, once you have those signs and symptoms, even if you are not coughing, we are kindly requesting that go and be screened. And the screening we have now is so it has greatly improved. We are at least able to do some x-rays in our communities. So go and have a chest x-ray, and if you have signs and symptoms as well as an x-ray that is suggestive of tuberculosis, see a clinician and you will be managed.
Quickly, how do we get the men in? But most importantly, what other interventions are in place to ensure that the focus, despite the fact that the men do present a challenge, you stay focused on the overall advocacy and public information drives?
Yes, thank you. Maybe you asked a question about prevalence. I would like to also just add a little of that.
Briefly.
Like Dr. Raymond mentioned, my colleague, the last prevalence survey that was done about 10 years ago, for every 100,000 people in Uganda, 253 had TB. 253 every 100,000. I don't know, 100,000 is like a population of a sub-county. So, but the distribution is not homogeneous. We see some places from program data at Ministry of Health, some places have more TB than others. Places like Karamoja, there's more TB there. Places, of course, urban centers, for an obvious reason of the congestion, and you know how TB is transmitted. Okay. So urban TB was found to be in more urban centers compared to the rural, where areas. So there is an aspect of population density. Then areas in West Nile also have a lot of TB. Lango. So there's also that heterogeneous kind of distribution. And as a program, as we are targeting the interventions, we go to those areas more. Compared to others where maybe the TB may not be a lot. So in terms of more interventions to find the TB, especially on the community aspect, because the facility level aspects are well known, the equipment is there, the doctors and the health workers are there. So on the community aspect, apart from finding men, we are trying to interest, you know, the ministry is going more into community. And one way of actually preventing TB is finding those who have the TB and bringing them to treatment centers. So like I mentioned before, we are involving, we are not leaving TB to the health workers alone. We are involving the lay people. We have people, you must have heard of people called VHTs, Village Health Team people. These are lay people who receive training to provide community level of care. So they have all been trained. We have heard of community health extension workers. So their role, they are playing it in the community, so that they are able, even for this man who is, or even woman who is not able to, not yet recognize that I have TB symptoms, this village person, the VHT or the community health extension worker, can assist them to come. Then the other intervention is the contact tracing. You must have heard about contact tracing around COVID time. So Rodrigo has been identified as a TB case and they live in this homestead. God forbid. Yes, but TB is with us. We cannot avoid it because it's in the air. It's in the air. So it looks for us. So we engage health workers and community persons, not only to start this patient on TB treatment, but also visit their home and screen the people around me, the people I stay with, and then the people I associate with even at work. So that's another community level intervention that the civil society also gets involved in. Of course, in addition to the health. Then one last aspect is starting TB treatment is not enough in itself. TB treatment is chronic care. Actually, at one point, we were treating TB for a year. Taking medicines for an entire, but now with research and more technology, it is going down. We are now at 6 months for the normal TB, which we call drug-sensitive TB. Drug-sensitive TB. So 6 month treatment, you will not treat it like this simple prescription of 3 days. So there has to be support. This person has to be supported. Discipline and inspiration. So again, that's an area where the community workers are also involved to make sure that they continue supporting this patient even at their home, adherence support and all that. Because if you don't adhere to that treatment, the issues of drug-resistant TB come in. Dr. Ginobrio and Dr. Byaruhanga, we are going to take a break. When we return, we shall delve quickly into leprosy because it's moving alongside TB. The connection is one that is pertinent and needs to be understood very clearly. Stay with us. We'll be right back. I'm glad you're still with us. It's the Kickstarter, and we are talking tuberculosis and leprosy. And this final segment, we are going to switch, but still stay within context and talk about leprosy. What is the connection? With me in studio, I have Dr. Raymond Byaruhanga. Dr. Raymond Byaruhanga is the Senior Technical Advisor, Tuberculosis, Ministry of Health. He's also a member of the National TBI Leprosy Division. That is a whole lot of expertise and authority when it comes to tuberculosis, as well as other interventions that are being rolled out across the country. We also have Dr. Rodrigo Ginobrio, Programs Manager at Uganda Stop TB Partnership, and that means he is well embedded into the interventions that civil society organizations are undertaking to save you
But the question is, are you saving yourself? Are you taking care? Are you minding? And are you content on being a better citizen? The men have been cited as transmitters because there is a tendency to drag when it comes to going for checkups in hospitals. Even when the symptoms come through, there's a tendency to think, oh, I am big, I can get over this. A glass of wine or two will clear this. It doesn't. Go to the hospital and then get checked, especially if that cough is persistent and if it shows some blood in it. That is a very, very clear sign that you're grappling with TB. Gentlemen, the transition into leprosy.
Yes.
We are transitioning on MorningAtNTV, but ideally there is none like a transition. Those are pretty much, I was going to give them a very good connection here, support diseases, but they are not support diseases, so to speak. But somebody suffering leprosy, the transmission mechanisms are the same?
Yes.
Who do I begin with?
I can go first.
Yes.
Okay. So leprosy, what is it? What is the current burden? But most importantly, in light with the International Day that was yesterday, what should we take note of?
Yeah, thank you so much. So leprosy, to say, I can, if I was to use the word, it's a cousin.
It's a cousin
of tuberculosis. That's why you even see the disease programs, they are together. So it is caused by a germ. We mentioned TB is caused by a germ called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So now its cousin that causes leprosy is the Mycobacterium leprae. So you see, you remember the classifications in your biology lessons of so you see they're from the same family.
I'm trying to open the chambers.
Yes.
Okay.
So leprosy is also an old age disease. I'm sure those of you read your Bible, you must have heard about leprosy. The man who had leprosy and was told to go to the Jordan, you know, for healing. So it is also a very old disease caused by a germ that is a cousin to TB. So the mode of transmission basically similar to the one for TB that is already mentioned, and but the disease in terms of presentations is it's quite different.
Very, that's what is confusing, especially to the common eye. When you see who a leprosy sufferer is, and then you look at what's happening to the TB guy, you wouldn't believe unless you're, of course, listening to experts like you. But Dr. Biaruhanga, what is the burden when it comes to leprosy across the country?
So leprosy in this country is not that we have actually reached levels of elimination.
Oh, wow.
And however, it still devastates the person, first of all. And as a ministry, we are there as a people-centered ministry or a patient-centered approach, where we want to look at the patient and not just the disease.
That's right.
And we're looking at the person holistically. So currently the burden is about, we are expecting to see 500, 600 people with leprosy every year. And leprosy, from the geographical point of view, we have seen a lot of leprosy cases in the West Nile region. Why? We are still trying to also understand and study more about the prevalence of leprosy in the West Nile region, but there are issues around, refugees that are coming from the South Sudan and the Democratic Republic of Congo that come in, and services the other side are not that strong to screen and pull them out and start them on treatment. That's right. But we are also seeing leprosy patients here in the central region. We have a whole hospital in Buluba, in Busoga. There are also leprosy cases in Busoga region. We have seen leprosy cases in Gasese, in Kagando. And we have seen leprosy cases actually also in Chigezi and in Ankole. So, but the biggest prevalence of leprosy cases we've noted is in West Nile. And the other thing that we need to know about leprosy is that even when it is transmitted through the air, like the tuberculosis bacteria, it affects, for the tuberculosis, affects the lungs.
The lungs.
For the leprosy bacteria, it affects the skin. Okay. It targets the skin, and it targets the nerves. And that's where we see people that hold fire, and they don't feel the heat, and they end up being burned. The first sign, usually, of leprosy is a skin patch or change in your skin. If my skin is as brown as this or as black as this, it becomes more brown. And that particular patch has lost sensation. So when you touch it and pass, you don't feel anything.
That is.
And this tends to grow bigger and bigger, and it tends, as the leprosy gets deeper and deeper, it gets into your peripheral nerves, your nerves of the fingers and the legs, and then starts, making you less sensational, so you don't feel anything. You step on a thorn, you step in fire, you step in ice, and you will not feel anything. And you end up getting an ulcer, and then you end up getting, your fingers reducing and getting off. And that's how you see many leprosy cases with that level of disability. Now, when you reach that level of disability, that shows that actually you are at the end stage of leprosy. Whereas if you had got diagnosed for
at
that
the
skin
time
patch,
the first sign came through,
you'll get treatment and you'll get better, and you'll not get to those levels of disability.
Let Dr. Trinobrio do what is no doubt a wrap up, because we are out of time. I would have loved to exhaust this discussion, but I believe the interventions that you are undertaking will be able to drive the message further, especially off air. What is the level of awareness, and what interventions, particularly he speaks about the fact that the West Nile is most affected. He says we have a hospital in Buluba. I believe when the hospital was established, that particular part of the country was most affected. Is there any chance West Nile could receive a facility to deal with this challenge?
Yeah, thank you for that. So in terms of the interventions to try and curb leprosy, like we've mentioned, the disease program that is working against leprosy is integrated with the TB program. So most of the interventions for TB are actually integrated with leprosy. Exactly. Much as it's a bit more insidious and the prevalence is low, when we are conducting community level interventions for TB, they are integrated with the leprosy ones.
Okay.
Yes. I'll mention an example. There is a campaign that has been going on, the Cast TB campaign. This is basically a community awareness and screening within the community. So when we're educating the health workers to go out and look for TB in the community, we also build their capacity to look for leprosy at the same time and refer these patients for management at the health centers.
Okay, gentlemen, many thanks. Like I said, time is not our very best ally, but your perspective and information has emboldened our understanding of these diseases, and I hope that it will, of course, drive some sort of positive engagement on the part of the men. I keep emphasizing that, so that you do not be the guys who are transmitting some of these diseases. Time now to switch to another conversation, and my colleague Rashul Adidi, who is on the ground, is talking to Emmanuel Mugabe, an IT expert who is working with a journalists network to discuss digital security and how journalists can ensure safety of their content, detection of AI generated content, among others, as one of the challenges that are emerging in the conduct of our duty. A very good morning, Rashul.